Today we'll be learning the Pythagorean theorem. So to begin with, let's go over some vocabulary. Let's identify parts of a right triangle. The two shorter sides, or the sides adjacent to the right angle, are called the legs. So adjacent means next to. The legs form the right angle. So these two are legs. And then the third side, or the longest side, is called the hypotenuse. It's the side opposite the right angle. So it's the longest side, hypotenuse. So we use the Pythagorean theorem. We use the letters A, B, and C. And we'll use letters A and B to identify or denote the legs, and we'll always use C as the hypotenuse. So here's the Pythagorean theorem. A squared plus B squared is C squared. So here's our triangle, our right triangle in the middle here. And we can see how long each side is because we have these little squares here. So here we have a leg, right, because this is the right angle. And with this side is 3 units long. So let's just call that side A. Remember, we use A or B for the legs, so this is 3 units long. And this side is 1, 2, 3, 4 units long. We'll call that B. And this side is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units long. And we'll call that C because that's the hypotenuse. It's the biggest side. So now we know the side lengths, and let's see if our formula works. So A squared, or 3 squared, plus B squared, or 4, is equal to C squared, or 5. So 3 squared is 9, and 4 squared is 16, and 5 squared is 25, and 9 plus 16 is 25. So indeed that works. So A squared plus B squared is equal to C squared. So we're going to use that formula to determine the side lengths, whether we're missing a leg or a hypotenuse. So let's start with finding the hypotenuse, or C. We know the legs, we need to find the hypotenuse. So remember, our formula is A squared plus B squared is equal to C squared. And this is a leg, and this is a leg, and so we'll call that A and B. It doesn't matter which one's A or B. So here I'm going to have 5 squared plus 12 squared equals C squared. So 25 plus 144 equals C squared. 25 plus 144 is 169. So C squared equals 169. But I want to know what C is, so I need to take the square root of both sides. So the square root of 169 is 13. So C is 13. So let's look at our calculator here. We could have just put this right in. 5 squared plus 12 squared equals 169, and then just take the square root. So the hypotenuse is 13 units long. So go ahead and try example number 2. So remember, A squared plus B squared equals C squared. And again, it doesn't matter which one's A and which one's B. 12 squared plus 16 squared equals C squared. 144 plus 256 equals C squared. 144 plus 256 is 400. And again, that's C squared, but we just want to know what C is, so we need to take the square root of both sides, so 20 is equal to C. Again, I could have just done that straight on my calculator. I could have gone and said 12 squared plus 16 squared equals 400, and take the square root of that, and it's 20. All right. Jane and Zachary started walking at the same point, but Zachary walks 5 feet north while Jane walks 7 feet east. How far apart are Jane and Zachary when they stop? Round to the nearest tenth. So let's start. We're starting at this point here. And who walks first? First, Zachary. We're starting here, and Zachary walks 5 feet north. So he goes that way. And Jane walks 7 feet east. Well, looky there. We got a right triangle. So what they want to know is the distance. They are between each other, so they want to know the hypotenuse. So here's our right angle, and Zach walked 5 feet north, and Jane walked 7 feet east. So we need to find the distance they are, because now Jane's here and Zach's here, so how far apart are they? So we need to determine the hypotenuse, so we need to say a squared plus b squared is equal to c squared. 5 squared plus 7 squared is equal to c squared. 25 plus 49 is equal to c squared. 74 is equal to c squared. So when I take the square root of 74, let's see what happens here. It's not a perfect square, so let's go 5 squared plus 7 squared equals 74, and I take the square root. It's 8, so we'll say it's 8.6. We're going to round to the nearest tenth. So it's 8.6 feet. All right, let's try a different type. In these examples, we know the hypotenuse, but we need to find a missing leg. So if we think about it, the hypotenuse is the biggest side, so we need to find something smaller. So we don't want to add, we want to subtract. So we're going to rearrange the Pythagorean theorem, and this is going to cut down on all the math. So when we know the hypotenuse, we're going to say c squared minus, in this case, b squared is going to equal a squared. So we could do the a squared plus b squared equals c squared, but that would make a lot more work. So let's just cut it to the quick and say, hey, we know the biggest side, so we're going to subtract the other small side to get the other small side. So c squared is 7 squared minus 3 squared is equal to a squared. So 49 minus 9 is equal to a squared. So 40 is equal to a squared. So we don't want a squared, we want a, so we're going to take the square root, and let's see what happens. That's not going to be a perfect square, so we have 7 squared minus 3 squared equals 40, the square root of 40, so 6.3, because we're rounding to the nearest tenth, I think. 6.3 equals 8, a. So go ahead and try example 5. So here we're trying to find a leg, so we're going to use a subtraction problem. C squared minus, we have a, so we're going to say c squared minus a squared is equal to b squared. So 25 squared minus 49 squared, oops, minus 7 squared, minus 7 squared is equal to b squared. So 625 minus 49 is equal to b squared. It's 576. And now we need to take the square root of 576. So let's do this on our calculator. 25 squared minus 7 squared, and the square root of 576 is 24, so this is a whole number. 24 is equal to b. All right, in our final example, Bobby leans a 15-foot ladder against his house. The base of the ladder is placed 4 feet from the base of the house. How far up the house does the ladder reach? Round to the nearest tenth. So we have a ladder, and a ladder is leaning, so it's going to be our hypotenuse, right? It's going to be our hypotenuse, because the 15-foot ladder is going to be leaning against the house, and we know it's 4 feet from the house, so we probably have a bigger angle than that, don't we? If our 15-foot ladder, we're probably a little more steep there. We're probably more like that, right? There we go. And so here's our right angle. Oops. Here's our right angle. And we know that the ladder's leaning against the house. It's 15 feet. And it's 4 feet from the base of the house. Well, here's the house, so it's 4 feet out. So how far up the house? So we're going to try to find a leg. Let's say we're going to try to find A. So we know the hypotenuse, so it's going to be a c squared minus b squared equals a squared. So we're going to take 15 squared minus 4 squared equals a squared. So what is 15 squared? It's 225 minus 16 equals a squared. It's 209. And again, I just want a, so I'm going to take the square root. The square root of 209 is 14.5 feet high.